Welcome to English Stories for Listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you genuinely want to be fluent in English.
In a small village, surrounded by tall trees and a clear river, there lived a girl named Maya. She was gentle, with big brown eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. Maya had two brothers, Aryan and Samir. They were older than her, and they loved her more than anything in the world. Aryan was strong and brave, always protecting his sister. Samir was kind and wise, always guiding her. Every morning the three of them would walk together through the forest. They would talk and laugh, sharing stories about their dreams and hopes. The forest was their favorite place, full of hidden paths and mysteries. The birds sang sweet songs, and the wind whispered through the leaves, making the forest feel alive. One day, while they were walking, they found a small, hidden path that they had never seen before. It was covered in vines and leaves, as if it had been forgotten by time. Maya, curious as always, wanted to explore the path. Her brothers agreed, and together they walked down the narrow trail. The path twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the forest than they had ever been. The trees grew taller, their branches intertwining above, blocking out the sunlight. The air became cooler, and the sounds of the forest grew quieter. It was as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As they walked, they found an old, abandoned house. It was hidden among the trees, covered in ivy and moss. The windows were broken, and the door hung loosely on its hinges. The house looked like it hadn't been touched in years, maybe even decades. Maya felt a chill run down her spine as they approached the house. She wasn't sure if it was from the cold air or from something else, something she couldn't explain. But she didn't want to show her fear to her brothers. So she took a deep breath and stepped forward. Aryan and Samir followed her, their eyes scanning the area. They could feel that something was different about this place. It was as if the house was waiting for them, expecting them. But why? They didn't know. When they reached the door, Aryan pushed it open. The door creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the silent forest. Inside, the house was dark and cold. Dust covered everything, and the air smelled of age and decay. But there was something else too. A feeling, a presence, as if they were not alone. Maya held onto her brother's hands tightly as they stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under their feet, and the walls seemed to close in around them. But they didn't turn back. Something was pulling them forward, deeper into the house. As they walked through the rooms, they found old furniture covered in dust, books scattered on the floor, and broken toys lying forgotten in corners. It was as if a family had once lived there, but had left in a hurry, leaving everything behind. In one of the rooms they found a small, dusty mirror hanging on the wall. Maya walked up to it and wiped the dust away with her hand. As she looked into the mirror, she saw something strange. Her reflection was there, but it wasn't just her. Behind her, in the reflection, she saw a shadow, a figure standing in the corner of the room. Maya gasped and turned around quickly, but there was no one there. Her brothers saw the fear in her eyes and asked what was wrong. She told them what she had seen, but when they looked in the mirror, they saw nothing. Aryan tried to comfort her, saying it was just her imagination. But deep down, they all felt that something was wrong. They decided to leave the house, but as they turned to go, they heard a noise. It was soft at first, like a whisper, but it grew louder. It sounded like someone was crying, a soft, heartbroken sob. The sound was coming from upstairs. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She looked at her brothers, her eyes wide with fear. Aryan and Samir exchanged a look, and without saying a word, they started walking up the stairs. The sound of crying grew louder with each step, pulling them closer. When they reached the top of the stairs, they saw a door at the end of the hallway. It was slightly open, and the crying was coming from inside. Aryan stepped forward and pushed the door open. Inside, the room was empty, except for a small bed in the corner. On the bed, there was a doll, old and worn, with a tear-streaked face. Maya felt a wave of sadness wash over her as she looked at the doll. It was as if the doll was crying, as if it was alive and had a heart full of sorrow. She walked over to it and picked it up. As she held the doll in her arms, the crying stopped, and the room grew silent. But the silence was heavy, filled with a deep sadness that made Maya's heart ache. She didn't know why, but she felt connected to the doll, as if it was a part of her past that she couldn't remember. Her brothers watched her, their faces full of concern. They didn't understand what was happening, but they knew that they had to get out of the house. Aryan gently took the doll from Maya's hands and placed it back on the bed. Then he took her hand and led her out of the room. As they walked down the stairs, the house seemed to close in around them. The walls creaked, and the air grew colder. It was as if the house didn't want them to leave, as if it was trying to keep them there. But they didn't stop. They walked quickly through the house, their footsteps echoing in the silence. When they reached the door, Aryan pushed it open, and they stepped outside into the fresh air. As soon as they were outside, the feeling of heaviness lifted, and they could breathe again. But the memory of the house, the crying doll, and the shadow in the mirror stayed with them. They couldn't forget what they had seen and felt. They walked back home in silence, each of them lost in their thoughts. That night Maya couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the shadow in the mirror and heard the crying. She felt as if the house was calling her, pulling her back. The next morning, Maya told her brothers that she wanted to go back to the house. Aryan and Samir were shocked. They didn't want to go back, but they couldn't let Maya go alone. So, reluctantly, they agreed. The three of them walked back to the forest, following the same path they had taken the day before. The forest seemed darker, the trees taller, and the air colder. But they kept walking, driven by a feeling they couldn't explain. When they reached the house, it looked even more abandoned and forgotten than before. The door was still open, as if it had been waiting for them. They stepped inside, and the cold, heavy air surrounded them once again. Maya led the way this time, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know why she felt so drawn to the house, but she knew that she had to find out. They walked through the rooms, their footsteps echoing in the silence. When they reached the room with the doll, Maya walked over to the bed and picked it up again. As soon as she touched the doll, the crying started once more, soft and heartbroken. But this time it was different. It was as if the crying was coming from inside Maya, from a deep place in her heart. She held the doll close, and suddenly she felt a wave of memories flood her mind. She saw herself as a little girl, playing with the doll in this very room. She saw her mother's face, smiling down at her. She saw her brothers, younger and full of life, laughing and playing with her. But then the memories changed. She saw the house burning, flames licking at the walls. She saw her mother, her face full of fear, trying to protect her. She saw her brothers, holding her close, trying to shield her from the fire. And then everything went black. Maya gasped and opened her eyes. The crying had stopped, and the room was silent once again. But this time she understood. The house was not just a house. It was their home, the home they had lost in a fire when they were children. The doll was hers, a gift from her mother, the only thing that had survived the fire. Her brothers had taken her away from the burning house, saving her life. But in doing so, they had lost everything. Their home, their parents, their childhood. They had buried the memories deep inside, trying to forget the pain. But the house, the doll, and the memories had been waiting for them, waiting to be found. Tears streamed down Maya's face as she held the doll close. She looked at her brothers, and she saw the same pain in their eyes. They had all forgotten, but now they remembered. The house had given them back their past, their memories, and their pain. But it had also given them something else. It had given them each other. They were not alone in their pain. They had each other, and together they could face the past and the future. Maya looked at the doll, and she felt a sense of peace. The crying had stopped because the doll was no longer alone. It had been found, just like their memories, just like their love for each other. They left the house that day, but they didn't leave the memories behind. They took them with them, knowing that they would never forget. But they also knew that they didn't need to forget. They had each other, and that was enough. As they walked back home, Maya felt a warmth in her heart. She knew that no matter what happened, she would always have her brothers. They were her family, her strength, and her love, and together they could face anything. The story of the house and the doll stayed with them, but it was no longer a story of sadness and loss. It was a story of love, of family, and of finding each other again. And that was the most beautiful story of all. But as they walked, a question lingered in Maya's mind. What had started the fire? What had taken their parents away? And why had the house waited so long to reveal its secrets? The answers were out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be found. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. Or was it? Sometimes the past holds secrets that we are not ready to face. But what if those secrets are the key to understanding who we are and what we are meant to be? What would you do if the past came knocking on your door? Would you open it, or would you keep it locked away?